My name is Julie Garden Robinson, and I'm your host for today's recorded Field to Fork webinar. This is brought to you by North Dakota State University Extension, and we welcome all the watch parties. We've been seeing on social media that states beyond North Dakota are trying out watch parties. We are celebrating a milestone in 2025. This is the 10th year that we've done this series, and we're really glad you're watching today's webinar. We've reached literally thousands of people with information about growing, preparing, and preserving fruits and vegetables. And we've archived all of the webinars from the last 10 years, so you can watch them anytime you want on our Field to Fork webinar page. On the 23rd of April, we will not have a webinar, but on the 30th, we will be back and we'll learn about the Food Preservation Toolkit with Karen Blakesley at Kansas State University. We invite you to complete a short online survey. It will be emailed along with the recording so that you can take it in anytime you want. It'll only take a couple of minutes, and be sure to sign up for an opportunity for a prize. I do want to acknowledge the ongoing support of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Marketing Service. That brings us to our speaker. Dr. Janet Knodel is the professor and extension entomologist at North Dakota State University in Fargo, and for the past 26 years she has provided leadership in extension entomology in the North Dakota Integrated Pest Management Program. Activities focus on developing IPM strategies for insect pests of crops and gardens. She also studies pollinators in gardens and field crops, including bees, syrphid flies, and butterflies. So we welcome Janet.
Hello, my name's Janet Knodel. I'm a professor and extension entomologist for NDSU Extension, and I'll speak to you about Ghost in the Garden, night flying moths. Pollinators are very popular today, and the super pollinators are usually thought of as the bees. However, moths are equally important pollinators, and they're active at night when bees are usually back in the hive. They're very effective pollinators because of their hairs, as you can see by the picture of the clover cutworm, that they're very hairy, and especially on the underbelly, they pick up pollen and they then deposit on the next flower. So they're pretty effective at pollination, and they're also important in the ecosystem as a food source for bats, frogs, small owls, songbirds, flying squirrels, and even grizzly bears. We have a cutworm here in western North Dakota called the army cutworm, and this one overwinters here, and it's a major pest on wheat. And they'll get active in the summer and then migrate to the Rocky Mountains, where they feed on alpine flowers. And then they hide during the day under rocks and soil and debris. And the grizzly bears find them, and then they feed on them, and they end up being a very important food source for the grizzly bear to fatten up on for overwintering. So it's an interesting relationship. A couple important things about moths that makes them so important, and that is their eyes. There's two compound eyes on either side of their head, and each one contains thousands of individual lenses called ommatidia. And these lenses are very helpful in making the moths see better at night because they have small bumps on the surface of the moth's eye. And this improves the anti-reflective properties of their eye. In fact, we're interested in using this pattern found on the moth eyes and putting this onto plastics because it could lead to reflection and glare-free displays like screens for our TVs, cell phones, computer monitors, and eyeglasses, and more. So we're actually trying to copy or mimic this pattern on the surface structure of the moth eye. Moth eyes are very good at detecting movements, seeing colors, and some species can also detect ultraviolet light. The mouth part is another important feature of moths. They use a siphoning, probing action in the flower to suck out nectar, and they do this through a long, slender proboscis. And you can see in the picture with the hawk moth that it has a quite long proboscis, and when it's not being used for sucking out the nectar, it's curled and underneath the head of the moth. And it is made by the two galea, and in the center there's a food canal, and that's where they suck up the nectar. Some moths, the mouth parts are absent and non-functional. So there is a competition for the longest moth tongue, and that goes to the Wallace sphinx moth. And this was a new species that was described in 2021. And this species is found in Madagascar. And if you want to look at a typical tongue, here's the Morgan sphinx moth. And this is found in the African mainland with about a 4-inch tongue. So what kind of flower would this Wallace sphinx moth feed on? Well, it feeds on one with an extremely long nectar tube. That's the Madagascar star orchid. For the life cycle of a moth, it's complete metamorphosis, and they have 4 life stages: the adult moth, eggs, larvae or caterpillar, and pupae or cocoon. The larval stage is the damaging stage to most plants because they feed on the leaves or burrow into stems, and that causes damage to the plant. The cocoon is the stage that the larvae does the transformation into the beautiful adult moth. Each stage looks different, as you can see, and when you see insects that you think are moths out in the field, like the adult moth or the caterpillar, you're going to need to learn how to identify each of these stages because they look very different. The moth life cycle can have 1 generation per year, and other species can have 2 to 3 generations per year. Especially down in the southern states, they have multiple generations. So moths belongs to the order Lepidopteran, just like butterflies do. However, moths are much more numerous. Worldwide, there's about 160,000 known moth species, whereas butterflies, there's only 20,000 known butterfly species. In North America, we have 12,000 known moth species and only 825 known butterfly species. So you can see the moths are much more numerous. There's many more different species, and they're very diverse. And I'm sure most of you can name several butterflies species, but I'm not sure how many of you can name 6 or more moth species. Anyway, they're most active night flying, but some will fly in the day, like the hawk moths will fly at dusk or dawn. But butterflies are mainly day flying. Another difference is their antenna. Like in the Luna moth picture in the lower left-hand corner, they have feathery or branched antennae, and the yellow-collared skate moth have straight filament antennae. And here the butterfly usually has a knob antenna, and sometimes they will be hooked. They use antennas as a sensory apparatus that can sense pheromones or chemicals that the moths use to communicate with each other, and also to find their host plants. Moths typically have a more robust body and are often fuzzy or hairy on their body. Here you can see a caterpillar that's very hairy, and also this common loofah moth that has quite a bit of hair. And you also notice the patterns on the wing. Butterflies, on the other hand, have smooth skin and usually very little hair, and oftentimes they'll have snake eyes as a defensive mechanism against predators. The butterfly adults are very slender and beautiful. Moths typically spread their wings out at rest, and butterflies will hold their wings upright. The colors in moths are typically more dull, brown, black, olive green, and they often have markings on the wings. And there is exceptions to this rule. The primrose here is very colorful with the pink and yellow hairs. Butterflies, on the other hand, are very colorful and bright, like the viceroy and the red admiral here. So learning how to identify a caterpillar of Lepidopteran is important, so we need to know a little bit about their structure. The head will always have a head capsule on it, and the three segments behind the head are called the thorax, and they usually always have 3 thoracic legs, pairs. The abdomen is the rest of the body segments, and they'll have abdominal prolegs and an anal proleg. At the end of the prolegs, there's crochets, and these can be long and a half circle, or short and a half circle, or a complete circle. And sometimes you'll have short, long crochets. And many people who do taxonomy on Lepidopteran use the crochets for help in identification. So let's learn how to identify moth caterpillars from some other major orders. First, the moth caterpillar will always have 2 to 5 pairs of prolegs on the abdomen. This one happens to have 5. And there's always crochets on the proleg, but you probably won't see these with your eye. You'll probably need a magnification with a microscope. And then it has the 3 pairs of thoracic legs and a head capsule. And a lot of times they're going to have hair on the body, be spiny, or even a horn like in this hermit sphinx moth. Over on this side is the order Hymenoptera, which includes the wasps, bees, sawflies, and ants. And the sawfly here that pictured has 6 or more pairs of prolegs and smooth skin, and there's no crochets on the prolegs. And also you'll notice they're a little bit smaller. And this is also a smaller caterpillar, only about 1 inch long when it's mature. Whereas the sphinx moth caterpillar was, a good 3 to 4 inches long. Moving on to the order Coleoptera. Here I have some white grubs. They're very large and robust, and they make a typical C shape, and they have a nice head capsule and 3 pairs of thoracic legs. The adult is known as June beetles or May beetles. And for the wireworm larvae, this one is very long and slender, has the head capsule and the 3 thoracic legs, and then at the anal end it has the structure. It looks like a couple of horns, but this will vary depending on the species, and we use that to help with identification. Continuing on with the beetles, the order Coleoptera. This is the Colorado potato beetle larvae. Again, very robust, has a nice head capsule, 3 pairs of thoracic legs, and no prolegs. And then here's a lady beetle larvae. Again, it has the head capsule, 3 thoracic legs, and no prolegs. It has the color of orange and black like the lady beetle adults. Here we have Diptera order, and this belongs to the flies. These happen to be blowflies, and we call fly larvae maggots. And they have no legs, no prolegs, and no head capsule. And this dark structure here at the head end is the mandibles that they can evert for feeding. And they feed on decaying organic matter, helping to break it down, or dead animals, helping with decomposition. Let's go through some common moth families that we may see in our gardens. Spingidae, hornworm, sphinx moth, or hawk moth. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the leafy spurge hawk moth. It's a beautiful moth. It was introduced as a biological control agent for control of the noxious leafy spurge. And the larvae is equally colorful and has the typical horn at the end of the abdominal segments. This is the white-lined sphinx moth. It has the nice line going through the forewings. The hind wings have some pink on them. And the larvae is in the background here, and it also has the horn on it. The pink is not part of the caterpillar. This is a pink fuchsia plant that has the flower buds closed. Now, sphinx moths are very fast flying. I'm sure you've seen them in your garden. They especially like trumpet-shaped flowers like phlox and other flowers, and they can fly up to 30 miles per hour, which is pretty amazing. They're often mistaken for hummingbirds. The Noctuidae family includes olives, cutworms, and underwings. This is the large yellow underwing, and again you can see the dull color and the markings on the wings. That's helps you tell you it's a moth. And the underwings typically always have a band on the hind wing. And then we have the redback cutworm here. Again, see the different markings that we use to help identify these moths. And then the larvae are cutworm, which can get up to 2 inches long when mature, like you see here. And this one has a red band across the back. And yes, there are some pests in the moth group. So we do have cutworm problems in our gardens, and they can be a significant problem chewing on the roots. Sometimes they'll climb up a seedling plant and cut it off early on in the seedling stage, and you'll find the seedling plant on the ground dead. And other cutworms are climbing cutworms, and they'll actually climb up the plant and cause defoliation. Okay, moving on to the Arabididae family. The old name for this family was Lamantridae, and the common name tussock moths, or caterpillars. So this is the tussock moth here for milkweed, and here's what the larvae look like. They have orange, white, and black colorations, and the coloration here is to indicate danger to predators since it's toxic. And I love the pale tussock moth. It's just beautiful with the intricate pattern and design on the wings. And equally so is the larvae with the hairy caterpillar and the tufts. Unfortunately, this is also the group that has the invasive spongy moth, or used to be called gypsy moth. So be aware of what this one looks like. It's not established yet in North Dakota, but it is in Minnesota. Another one in the Arabididae family, it used to be called Arctidae, is the tiger moths and lichen moths. And I just love the salt marsh caterpillars, and the moth is just beautiful with the white and black pattern and the orange patch with the black banding. And the caterpillar is a beautiful yellow hairy caterpillar. This is the banded woolly bear that we see so much in the late summer into fall. You often see the caterpillar crawling across the road, and it has that brown and black banding on it. And there's always been a folklore with the woolly bear caterpillar for winter predictions, and the more black you have, the harsher the winter is going to be. So this one here with only a few segments with the brown indicates a moderate winter, but if you have more brown, that would indicate a mild winter. Of course, it's not really true, but research has shown that the width of the coloration depends more on the diet of the caterpillar and what it's eating and its environment. There's quite a few different host plants for moths, but they typically like the white or pale colored flowers because they can see them easier at nighttime. Some of them are datura, morning glory, and common evening primrose. And they generally like those long tubular flowers because they're well adapted to, getting that nectar down in the bottom of those flowers. Some moths prefer landing platforms and clusters of flowers, and they usually like the ones that open later in the afternoon so they haven't been fed on by other pollinators, or even the evening. And remember the larval host plants, you also should have those around to keep the immature stage for the moths happy. Okay, for food sources and host plants for moths in general, they're nectar generalists, but there are some moths that are specialists and only feed on certain plants. And again, I usually recommend planting native plants if you can find good source of native plants in the garden, and you can also plant, native trees as well, because many of the larvae are defoliators of the trees, but they're usually not a pest unless you have a real young tree. And again, here's some of the native flowers that I have here in the picture. Starting in the upper left corner, we have Joe Pyeweed and then Blazing Star. Down on the second row, we have Milkweed and then Lead Plant. Some moths do have specific relationships, and one is the yucca moth, which plays a key role in the life of a yucca plant. So the plant is solely dependent on the yucca moths for pollination, and that's good for the moth or beneficial for the moth because their caterpillars feed only on the yucca seed that's going to develop. So that yucca moth will take that pollen and then fly to another yucca plant and deposit that, and that will cause the plant to develop a seed then, and will ensure food for its caterpillar. So they really have co-evolved together and they benefit from each other. There's quite a few night blooming flowers for moths. I wasn't aware there were this many. And there's a good fact sheet which I have the website for here from South Dakota State University Extension on night blooming flowers and host plants for moths. So you can look that up and download that resource for yourself. But we already mentioned some of them, the moonflowers and the datura. But I want to mention the flowering tobacco, nicotina, and it's very fragrant too, so that's very attractive to the moths. And I like the phlox, that's one of my favorites, and then here's the primrose. So you can plant assortment to try and attract some moths into your gardens. So there's a number of plants that you might want to consider. We already went over some of them. There's the trees, the birches, and the oaks, and here it lists some of the moths that it will attract. Wild grape is good for attracting several moths. And then lead plant, honeysuckle, and service berries. And here's some more plants. Asters, blazing star, goldenrod, Joe Pyeweed, rose milkweed, and yucca. You might want to think about establishing a moon garden. Use those white or silvery foliage plants. Some examples are white hydrangea, moonflowers, white cosmos, white lilies, white phlox. And they also like fragrant flowers, so you can also enjoy it as well. And instead of putting lighting out into the garden, just use the moonlight or very soft lighting. This will create a nice peaceful environment for you to go out and relax in the evening. You can also add water features, a shallow pan or bird bath with some stones in it for the moths, and some wind chimes. Try to avoid these bright lights which will attract the moths and cause them to get disoriented. So you don't want to use these. We'll talk a little more about that. It is fun to go out at night and watch the moths in your garden. You can do that by using this simple light trap. Just take a white sheet of cloth and then support it with a frame, and then put a light source up at the top, and you'll be able to see all the moths that are attracted. You can see there's all different sizes on here, small to large, and colors. So then enjoy taking some photos of the moths rather than killing and collecting the moths unless you're making a collection. Another way to watch moths at night, if you don't want to go to that extent of putting together a light trap, is you can use a flashlight and put a red lens or filter over it, and that won't scare or attract the moths, and you'll still be able to see them. And there's a National Moth Week in July for just honoring all the moths that are out there and the diversity. So moths are in trouble, so we do need our help, just like the other pollinators, the bees. So we need to turn out those lights at night. There's a lot of light pollution, and that has led to a significant decline in moths and fireflies. And also there's quite a few bird species that migrate at night, like this indigo bunting, which uses the stars to navigate north and south. So it's causing disruption to its migrations. And then with outdoor lights, there's a lot of little stakes you can put out in your garden with some lights, and they do look nice to you, but they're actually causing much confusion with the moths. They'll end up flying around the light in circles and eventually dying. So apparently some studies thought the outdoor lights looked like a rising sun to the moth, and usually when the sun starts to go up, the moths are going to be taking cover and hiding in vegetation. So that's what causes the confusion, because it's dark out and the moths see that light and think they need to start thinking about finding a safe hiding spot. The LED lights are good for us because they're nice and bright, but studies have shown that it just increases the mortality of insects. So we recommend using warmer colors or dim low voltage lighting or motion activated lights that turn on and off. And electric bug zappers are popular because people believe they kill a lot of mosquitoes and other biting pests. However, the research data shows that total catch per summer based on the insect was mainly moths and not biting insects. One study found over 13,000 moths in a trap one summer and only 31 biting insects. Another study from 1990 estimated that there's 4 million bug zappers sold and in use in the U.S., and it was killed about an estimated 71 billion harmless and beneficial insects. So overall, they're very detrimental to the insects in general, and they don't kill just the bad insects. They also kill many of the good insects like our pollinators. So another threat is actually detrimental to your own health. They can electrocute the insects using blast of laser, and this releases fine mists of the insect particles. And some of those particles may be carrying bacteria and viruses, and they can spread that up to 7 feet from the device. So that's kind of another scary thing that we don't know a lot about. But we do know that it can be detrimental to your health. Other problems with the moths, of course, is the use of pesticides, which they're very sensitive to, and then significant habitat loss in wild areas and native areas, and then there's many invasive species that are displacing our native species like the gypsy moth. So we really need to protect the moths. You can provide overwintering places for them, like brush piles, and leave the leaf litter, because that's where they're overwintering in and will emerge from in the summer. And then limit your pesticide use to only when very necessary, and do targeted spraying if you have to at all. There's quite a few different moth resources that are out there. I like the Xerces website. When you go onto it, just search for moths, and they have several articles on moths. And then the South Dakota State University Extension has that fact sheet I mentioned. The U.S. Forest Service has a fact sheet on moth pollination. And then there's a book on gardening for moths, a regional guide by McCormick and Gottfried. And then the Xerces Society also has the book on gardening for butterflies. And in that book, they have a whole chapter on moths. And for caterpillar identification, the book on caterpillars of Eastern North America by David Wagner is very useful. It has hundreds of beautiful photos and descriptions on how to identify them, their range, and other species you would confuse it with, and their hosts. So it's very handy, well worth it. Another resource I like is butterfliesandmoths.org, and this is very useful. I just searched for the Ackerman sphinx moth, and it has a lot of information about its life history, the caterpillar, adult, habitat, range, and other information for you if you want to look up other citations and references. And it also has a map, which is handy because you can see if it's found in North Dakota or Minnesota. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. And if you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer them. Please email them to janet.knodel@ndsu.edu. And also, I apologize for the problems we had with the Zoom today, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Have a good day.